For this week's panel on the pandemic and our COVID-ready campus, I sat down with Sona Dimidjian, professor in the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience and director of the Crown Institute, and Akirah Bradley, vice chancellor for student affairs. We talked about how COVID is affecting our students, faculty, and staff, and how we can help. Well, thank you for joining us today. First, I have to ask the question to both of you, Sona and Akirah. How are you coping with the changes from COVID-19? What are you doing for your own personal mental health? Akirah, why don't we begin with you?
Absolutely. Chancellor, thank you for asking that question. I feel like we don't ask each other enough, how are we doing? And for me, to be honest, it's been hard. It's challenging, right? It feels a little isolating being in COVID and not being able to really connect with your family and friends. And my family and friends are on the East Coast and the West Coast. So in Philadelphia and California. So I've built up great virtual relationships. But in addition to that, it's trying to eat well, trying to exercise, get outside, even if it's cold, because the fresh air helps. I know our students feel this, where sometimes you just feel stuck. So it's like, how can you get out, get the fresh air, walk around, and still enjoy life a little bit?
And Sona, how about you?
One of the things that I agree is so important is this idea of routines and what our daily activities are. You know, a lot of the research we do focuses on this idea of what we call ACE activities, ACE, so activities that give us a sense of accomplishment, a sense of connection, and a sense of enjoyment. And just as Akirah was saying, you know, each morning when I wake up, I look at my schedule for the day and ask myself, do I have at least some of each of these on my calendar today? And that practice, I think, of mindfulness is also so important when things are really hard and overwhelming, because it reminds us, you know, sometimes we can take this pandemic one day at a time. Sometimes it's like 1 hour at a time. And sometimes it's really like just one moment at a time.
Phil, how about you? How have you been doing? What have you been doing for your health?
The routine of, you know, getting up in the morning and taking a look at my schedule and making sure that, you know, I have some time for myself. And what I try to do is to find, you know, 30 minutes a day just to do some physical exercise. To kind of clear my head for the next Zoom meeting that's coming up. So I try to read before I go to bed just to get other things out of my mind, and, you know, or reading some fiction, kind of mysteries or thrillers. So if I may, let me direct a question to Akirah. So CU Boulder survived a pandemic 100 years ago. And it came out stronger. We came out stronger as a university on the other side. And I know we will again with this pandemic. But in the meantime, Akirah, how are our students doing? And what really inspires you about them and how they're handling this pandemic?
What I'll say about our students is there's a range of emotions. There's emotions of some frustration. There's emotions of some sadness that their college experience that they've waited their whole lives for is maybe not what they envisioned. It's not the same. They've had to adjust expectations and it's been challenging. But we also have students it's been exciting because they're here, they're in college. I actually met with a group of students virtually. The Dean of Students has a leadership council and I was a guest speaker there. And there was about 18 students on the call. And they were all so excited about some of the activities that they just started to join into. One student said, well, I came here thinking that I was going to have 10 new friends that I was going to have for a lifetime. And I met 2, but those 2 are going to be significant. Those 2 are going to be the 2 at my wedding. They're going to be the 2 walking side by side with me, you know, through life. And I was like, you know, that's a good attitude. That's some optimism right there.
I couldn't agree with you more. They're very resilient, and they have adapted so well to the changes that we've had to make in last spring and this fall. And they've just been terrific. And their parents have been wonderful as well. It's important to kind of take a step back and reflect and really, look at the big picture. And when you look back on the pandemic, what are your reflections?
I think two of the pieces I hold on to are that we have seen realities in ways that are more accurate and more clear, that help us be positioned for making really positive change in our world. And I would say the two that I see most clearly are, one is that I see people recognizing the way in which we are all connected, this interconnectedness in our world, that our physical health is connected to our emotional health, that our public health is connected to our economic health, that our individual health is connected to our community health. And one of the ideas that's so critical to the research that we're doing in the Crown Institute is this idea of common humanity. And what that means is that we all share this basic aspiration to be free of adversity and to be happy in our lives. And this means that we can have empathy for one another. We can put ourselves in each other's shoes. We can work together to ensure that we all have the right and the access to the knowledge and tools to be happy and to be well.
I really love the example of the interconnectedness. That if that's what we learned through this pandemic, not that it's well worth having the pandemic, but it's something amazing that we've learned from it.
I agree with you. If the ability of people to connect to that in ways that allows us to learn and to work more closely together. And as Akirah was saying before, as a faculty member and researcher on this campus, and also as the mom of a first year buck, I really agree with the amazing resilience and the ways in which students are stepping into leadership on our campus and in their own friendship circles and families and lives.
And I love what you said. And I resonate with it so much because my research background is in crisis and crisis management and recovery of institutions when they experience crisis as a community, right? So the work that you're talking about with the Crown Institute and the interconnectedness, like that's one of the huge findings for when a community comes out of crisis. They find themselves working better together. They find the collaborative efforts more far-reaching, and they find themselves this sense of humanity that sometimes right now, because you might walk past someone and you're walking on the other side of the street because their mask isn't on properly or whatever that may be, there's a disconnect a little bit that's happening right now because we're trying to social distance. But coming out of this, that sense of humanity and interconnectedness and the need for each other, because we're not going to get out and see the light at the end of the tunnel unless we are really connecting with each other. And we're doing it not only for ourselves, but for our community, right? Like at the end of this entire nation is going to be stronger because we have gotten through this together.
Sona, if I may, I'll turn back over to you. Our resiliency and compassion are especially important at times like this. And what have you noticed during this pandemic, and what advice would you give our students, faculty, and staff to cope during this time?
I think it's important to know that compassion really involves multiple elements that we kind of nest under this larger category that we call compassion. And one piece of that is really seeing and acknowledging the suffering and the hardship of other people and doing that without judgment. The other piece of compassion that I think is really important is really a feeling of empathy or tenderness for other people when they're having a hard time. So compassion isn't just a matter of the head of this acknowledging and understanding. It's also a matter of the heart, and it's really opening your heart. And I think that brings us to the third piece, which is also being ready to act. And that is such a critical part of compassion. And it really is looking for ways in which we as individuals and we as a community can take action that will help support others.
mental health and wellness is really so close to my heart as well. And when I think of our strategic imperatives, the first, of course, is to shape tomorrow's leaders. But we're not going to be able to shape tomorrow's leaders without ensuring that they're mentally and physically well, and that we are providing services for them that will help them. So I get concerned about obviously our students, where we've seen an increase in health and wellness issues, but also I get concerned about our faculty and staff because pre-COVID, we've seen an increase in the number of faculty, staff, and student who utilized our mental health services. And so what I want to be able to do post-COVID, and certainly during this time of COVID, is to really invest in health and wellness for not only our students, but for our faculty and staff. How can we emerge stronger? How can we emerge stronger from what we've learned through these past 7 to 8 months?
Most people today would prefer to spend less time on Zoom overall. And I think one of the kind of surprising consequences of being on Zoom so much with each other is that we have this opportunity to see each other really as full people. We have access to elements of each other's lives that we wouldn't have if we weren't in this context. And so, I was saying before we got on, hold on, let me wait until my daughter gets the dog out of the house, right? So he's not barking in the background. But if you were in a regular Zoom meeting with me, you'd see the messiness on the other side of this room. You'd see me walking through the kitchen to let the dog out. And I think that actually is that gives us an opportunity to engage with each other in really important ways that we can see one another as not just the roles that we occupy, as leaders on this campus or as faculty or staff and students, but really full people.
I love that, Sona. And it makes me think about this idea of compassionate leadership and what that means for each of us in our roles. But it's that head and heart connection, because we are like entering each other's spaces, right, through Zoom. We have, some of us, families that have come down with COVID, and we're trying to balance that as well as balance work, but we are all experiencing it at the same time, right? And so there's a uniqueness and connection to what we're all experiencing, and how we make decisions in a really compassionate way becomes important. And how we emerge stronger through this is really taking heed and pausing and reflecting in the ways that we're doing now, and just having those open conversations and the hard conversations of what are the things that we got right, what are the things that we didn't get right, and how do we push forward from here? What are the best environments that we learned our students actually learn best in? And I think there's a variety of different modalities that we've learned. Well, maybe for this particular function or this particular area, right, our students are excelling. And maybe in this way, hybrid doesn't work as well, right? But we're learning that same thing for our staff and faculty. How do they do their best work and show up for our students to be successful?
What's happened these past 8 or 9 months, the number one thing that I think about is really, similar to what the two of you said, and that's how I've really been able to draw some strength from the ability of our community to continue to work together, and how they've shared experiences together, and really deepening, our dedication to, university first. Just the evolution from where we were in March when the pandemic first came about, and we had to go remote, to where we are today. It's been for me a wonderful experience of humankind. I talked a little bit about the strategic imperatives. And, the third is to impact humanity. What I've seen through this pandemic is that our faculty and our staff and our students have come together to impact humanity. And that's what I'll take away from the pandemic as we move, whenever that will be in the next 6 to 9 months, getting back to what we called normal before. But I think the normal will be very different. And my hope and my belief is that compassionate part that we've all talked about, that humanity part will continue as we move forward. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you, Akirah, and to thank you, Sona, for spending the time with us this morning.
Thank you.
Thank
It's a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you both so much.